I just started following the feeling. So I moved out of my logical brain and I just followed the feeling. And one of the books spoke about the Theta Brainwave, and did a Google search, literally did a Google search. What is the Theta Brainwave? And this Thetahealing Center pops up, and it's in the Flatiron District. The building number is 1133. And I'm like, I gotta go there. And that same night, they were having like this manifestation meditation. And of course, we all heard about law of attraction and The Secret. And something about that resonated with me. I'm like, yeah, this is a real thing, because I was always so determined. And like, my friend lent me 20 grand to start my company. So I believed in like those synchronicities. And that's what led me to the center. And I had my first session, and like my mind was blown. It was my first experience with energy work, and so much got lifted. And the healer, she said, you know, we teach you how to do this. I was like, yes. I heard that I was a healer. This might be it. This might be the thing. And I took my first class, and the class was so powerful that it wasn't even about the words that they were saying. It was about the experience that I had, that I felt like my body opened up to this flow of energy that I had never experienced before. And it flowed, like, it literally felt like it was flowing through the top of my head, penetrating my brain. And I was reading all these things about like neuroplasticity and neuropeptides, and it just, I started to feel it. And that was like the opposite turning point, where it was like, I felt this, I can't go back. I have to go deeper into this. There's no way that I'm going back to the way that I lived before, because this feeling is what's real.
This is episode 42 of the Ownstream podcast, featuring Hemma Haridin. All right, welcome to the Ownstream podcast. I'm Stephen Shelley.
I'm Teresa Scoba.
And we have a wonderful interview to share with you this week. It's with our friend, Hemma Haridin, whom we know through, interestingly enough, through Sedona, Arizona, through our visits to various retreats given by Bentinho Massaro. And we've met Hemma here, but she still lives in New York. And of course, we lived in New York. And so we had a nice kind of connection right away based on our mutual time in New York City, she still being there, and of course where are we now? We're
in Sedona.
We're in Sedona,
and I think Hemma may have just moved to Florida, actually.
That's right,
like a week ago or something. So, but yeah, we first became interested in her. We kind of like felt a little magnetic pull to her when we saw her here in May at the Sedona retreat, and Stephen connected with her briefly, and but we didn't really connect until this retreat, and we had an evening where we all gathered, and she came over, and we just had a magical time, which we talk about briefly on the podcast. But Hemma really made a very strong impression on us as someone who had a radical transformation over the past few years, and a radical transformation from a life where she had a child very young. She was determined, very in the world, like describes, her first job in this New York City skyscraper, and feeling all of that, like, I have arrived type of material success, and starting her own businesses in the tax industry, and, doing this kind of like mainstream life, though with always a drive and determination that she couldn't explain. And then, having the death of a family member she was very close to, just open up this like new voice inside of her, basically, that had been there all along, and really just like completely transformed her life. And she listened to that. She took time. She just had this experience of having to shut down the rest of her life to kind of like reboot. And at first not knowing toward what end, and then just very, very clearly being led through, following her intuition to a new purpose that she really believes in very strongly, with conviction and with confidence is her calling, which she's now bringing into the world.
Yeah, there's a lot in this conversation, which I knew we would talk about a lot when we visited her. We actually did this conversation in her hotel room here in Sedona. And so you may, if you're a regular listener, you may pick up on a slightly different vibe. Usually we do our interviews through Skype or through internet kind of phone service, but this time we did it in person, and so we're passing the microphone around, and it was a lot of fun. So you may pick up on that. We're in the room with her, so it's a little different, but going into this, I knew we would have quite a bit to cover, but just so much more. I mean, this is a person who's very much grounded in her life, in the world, and doing things, and very active and creating a lot, coming from a place of real service. But she's also someone who has a vast sense of her verticality, if you will, up to all sorts of other expressions of self, if you will, at higher densities or dimensions, if you prefer that. And she talks about that very eloquently and very beautifully. So, this is really a conversation where somebody who's maybe more vertically minded, maybe more kind of into their spiritual life, or understanding the higher aspects of self and what's happening maybe outside of what we can typically see on a daily basis, this will be a conversation that's riveting for you. Or if you're just somebody who's sitting at a desk job and could care less about any of that, but who really wants to be inspired by somebody who went for it, who took bold, assertive action, and who allowed herself to be carried by a voice of a calling out of a life that didn't serve her into one that does, you will also be inspired and excited by this. Hemma has a lot of power. She is very graceful, very eloquent, and really, as Teresa said, her confidence shines through. And as we kind of get to at the end of this conversation, she's had an extremely accelerated path. And I think that's a theme that we're beginning to detect in many of our interviews, particularly with people who are younger and when I say younger, meaning less conditioned by belief systems that were prevalent in, say, the 70s and 80s, which is my situation. Teresa's, you're more the 80s and the 90s. Still conditioned. Yeah, we're both still kind of working through various old beliefs, lack beliefs, limiting beliefs. But she's her acceleration is so noticeable, and she's really done a lot of work on herself over the last just handful of years, and has skyrocketed. Like, she's really blasted off, and she just oozes that. She walks into a room and it's like, oh, this one, she's really got something going on.
Yeah. It's like she felt the call and she followed it, and that acceleration happened, and you really hear that in her stories. Just, oh, and then I knew that I just had to do that. I wasn't going back, I'm going to do that. And then she found this beautiful and powerful calling as a healer, and it is evident, knowing her, and she's done some healings with us. Like, it's something is working through her very strongly, and she now wants to teach others that, well, one, she does these healings with others, so that's part of her work. And she also is working with what she calls spiritual entrepreneurs, teaching people that have a gift and a calling to give to the world, how to turn that into a business and how to do that in a way that's powerful and that is fully expressed.
Yeah, and the last thing we'll say before we kind of turn it over to the interview is that, one thing that was particularly interesting to me was that she has a multifaceted journey with entrepreneurship. She ran franchises, a brick and mortar franchise business for a number of years, sold it, and now she runs an online kind of coaching platform business. So she has experience in two very distinctly different types of businesses, and she knew from an early age that she was going to be an entrepreneur, which is a great story. I can't tell you how happy we are to share this interview, because there's so much in here. She's the perfect Ownstream story of kind of going through a dramatic transformation and shift, and then now creating content and work and a body of work that is in a very forward-thinking paradigm in our world about healing and health, and really about acceleration. That cleaning up the past doesn't need to take you decades of work sitting in a chair working with a psychotherapist. It may not even need to take weeks. It can happen very, very quickly. And she's evidence of that, because she's healed herself. She's been really, really done a lot of work on herself, and her acceleration is very powerful. So enjoy. You're in for a real treat, and we'll be back afterwards to wrap up. Until then, enjoy our terrific chat with Hemma Haridin.
Okay, Hemma, welcome to the Ownstream podcast. We're recording in person. This is our second interview ever recording in person. When Stephen and I came to Bentinho Massaro's Sedona Experiment 2, we knew that we were about to meet some amazing people, and we had decided beforehand that we wanted to be, see who resonated, and we knew we would meet someone we'd want to speak to, or many someones we might want to speak to on the Ownstream podcast. And lo and behold, we connected with Hemma. And Hemma we had met or seen or resonated with actually at a prior retreat, but we didn't really get to talk. We knew she lived in New York, and we were kind of interested. And then she came over the first night of the experiment, and we had an amazing healing session. We were doing an exercise that turned into a healing session. Anyway, it was fantastic. We heard some of her story, and we really wanted to have the opportunity to share it here on the podcast.
So, we're sitting in Hemma's hotel room. And so if you hear some sounds of moving around and jostling and whatnot, it's us kind of passing the mic, but we'll also kind of take out a lot of the gaps. So, well, let's dive in. We'll we'll get started with we have a structure that we usually follow with a lot of our interviews. And so we'll kick it off, but it usually kind of just takes on its own shape and flow. But one of the things that struck us about being with you that night, was it a week ago now or so? It feels like 15 minutes ago or 25 years ago, but that's how time shifts in these Bentinho retreats. But was how what we were talking about and exploring with you was so different than the early portrait you painted of your life and growing up and business. And so I think one of the questions I like to ask at the beginning of a conversation is kind of tell us about the conditions you grew up in and what that experience was like, and if there were any signs then of you kind of having maybe special gifts, or you were rebellious, or you thought outside the box, you kind of did things differently. And let's kind of start there, kind of getting the sense of the early part of your life, and then we'll see where this goes.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you guys so much for having me. Just to jump into it, right now at this point in my life, I'm an energy healer and Akashic Records reader. And that actually just came about a year ago. So in the earlier stages of my life, I want to say let's start around 17. I had my daughter at the age of 17. So I had to grow up fairly quickly to be able to take care of her. I got married at 18, and I was always a driven person. So I was like the girl that had a belly in college. And I remember I went to City College in New York, and I remember walking up that hill like from 135th up to Comet with that big gigantic belly. And it's so funny because she came so perfectly. She came during spring break. So I remember leaving my classmates with a belly and then coming back from spring break with no stomach, and my teachers just like would not let it down. Like, what happened? Obviously I had the kid and I came back. So there was always something inside of me that was extremely determined, and I didn't know what that determination was. But at the age of 23, I decided to open my first company, which was a tax franchise. So I knew at a very early age that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Growing up, I grew up in a West Indian background, and my grandfather, he was the one. I was raised by my grandparents. My mother had moved to Florida when I was fairly young. She had me very young also. So I was raised by my grandparents, and my grandmother was a stay-at-home mom. And my grandfather, he was the one that was working, but he had like 3 jobs. So I grew up in like that, like working middle class family, and you had to work really hard, and college, I was the only one in my family that had the opportunity to go to college. I had gotten some scholarships from high school. And I think also the drive that I had, even though I had gotten pregnant at an early age, I didn't want to like shame my family. So it was like this push to work really, really hard. And so I opened my first company at the age of 23. And it was like that whole against all odds type of thing. My family didn't support me. They didn't, it was like, why'd you drop out of college? Number one, we're going to disown you. We're not going to, you're not welcome back here. But not in such a dramatic sense. But, and it was good. It was good for about 2 years. I had a lot of challenges in that business. I remember in the second year of that company, I had a partner because I was fairly young and everyone said I was lacking certain skills. And so I decided to go in with a partner. And in that year, he ended up like stealing half the money from the company and disappearing. And disappearing. And I was able to salvage it. I was able to, pick up the pieces and find a solution to continue running the company on my own. Mm-hmm. So that was first huge learning lesson for me. And then around the age of 27, this was in 2013, my grandfather passed away, and that was like my breaking point. So when he passed away, that's when I started to question, why was I doing everything? So I had so much will and I had so much determination, and I wasn't fulfilled. And everything that I had achieved, I was not fulfilled. So I ended up selling my company, and it was pretty good. It was like a 6-figure deal, so I was able to take some time off and have some self-reflection. And the biggest thing that happened when he passed away was I was there when all night in the hospital when we knew that he was going to die. He was very sick. He had Alzheimer's, and his blood pressure was very low. They asked if he wanted to be resuscitated. He had a DNR, which was like, do not resuscitate. So in the event something happened, they were just going to let him go. So I decided to wait because it was like the inevitable. And I remember in the morning, waiting all night, nothing happened. He was in the same state. It was very critical. And I remember in the morning, his blood pressure going up, and the nurses came in the room and they were like, go home. He's going to be okay. And like, I got in the car and I probably was like 2 blocks away. And then we got the phone call. He passed. So I was so pissed off. Like, I was so mad. I was so mad, and I was just like, I cannot believe you did this to me. And there's a feeling that came over me, and it was quite instantly that he was with me. That he was with me, and he was communicating with me, and he was telling me that he didn't want me to see him that way, and he just wanted to be alone, and that it was going to be okay, and that I have to be strong for everyone else, because he was like the rock in the family. So like, he was kind of passing it to me, and it was such an intense experience that I couldn't pretend, like I couldn't say I was making it up. It was so strong that I knew his presence was there. And after he passed, things started coming back to me in childhood of being able to communicate with him while he was alive, like telepathically almost. And just knowing that I had like this, I wouldn't have called it an ability, but just knowing that there was something different about the way my eyes saw the world. I just knew it was completely different. I was always this positive person, and I can see things in angles that other people couldn't see it, but I didn't take it as a gift. I actually took it as me being weird, like me being odd, because no one saw it. Like, no one saw where it was coming from.
That's how you see it when you're a kid.
Yeah, and but yeah, so that's the beginning, and then also around that time is when I started to like get the sense, or even I would meditate. So I started a meditation practice. I started running. I was overweight. I was around 206 pounds at that time. And I decided I really wanted to get healthy. I became like a vegetarian overnight. It was just like such a crazy shift. Just something in my body was telling me like, you can't go on this way. So I like gave up drinking. Not that I was a heavy drinker, but like I just said, I'm just going to clean house and become a vegetarian and just do like green juices and smoothies and and so I would do a meditation practice. I would do like walking meditation or running meditation. And I just started to open up. I started to like drop into this place that I hadn't experienced before, because I was always and even now you guys can hear like how fast I'm going, right? I was always like a very analytical person, business-minded. It's all about structure. It's all about strategy. And when I took that time off, it's like the world just completely got flipped upside down. I started to see it in a different way. And I just started to receive information. I would just call it information. And it came through so strong that it was just this knowing of like who I was and what I was here to do. But at the same time, it was completely overwhelming. It was completely overwhelming because there was like no blueprint. There was no like no structure to it. Like, oh, okay. So I started hearing like, you're here to heal people. You're a healer. And that was so obvious to me because I took care of my grandfather for 4 years before he passed. Like he had a feeding tube and he needed his diapers changed. And my grandmother had went through certain surgeries and I was like their nurse. So it was like so apparent to me. When I heard it, I just didn't know what it meant. And then my daughter had confided in me that she was able to see auras. And so since I got into meditation and I was, reading about the chakra system and the energetic body, when she told me that, I didn't doubt her because I knew that there was something inside of me that when I was her age, I probably said it to someone and they shut me down. Like I don't have the direct memory, but I just remember a shutting down of those abilities. So that's how I ended up exploring it because I was like, well, if she has this gift, I don't want her to feel weird. So let's dive in. Let's dive into it together.
That's a good place to pause in the kind of linear timeline. Now let's kind of dive into a few things you mentioned that really stuck out to me. Anything? Yeah. Well, I guess the first thing you said that's stuck out to me was you always knew you were going to be an entrepreneur. I never knew that. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur now. I don't guess you don't have to have that experience to be an entrepreneur, but that's a really clear thing. Like I'm going to be an entrepreneur, and certainly meeting you're very driven. You're very much a leader. You sit up front. There's no shrinking violet syndrome in you, which is great. But when you think back to you at that age, what was the thought process to I'm doing my own thing? Because I came out of school, I think most people come out of school, and I finished school, which if I could go back, I probably wouldn't go to school. But I came out of school thinking, okay, I got to get a job. So that's that's a very different mindset. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So when I was 14, I remember my my best friend, she would make these knit bags and she would give them away to people. And I was like, no, we need to sell them. No. And then we would go to Michael's and calculate. I would calculate this is the cost of your yarn and I don't know where it came from. So that was my first instinct of selling things, right? And I feel genetics because back home with my grandparents back home, because they always say back home because they immigrated from Guyana. They were entrepreneurs because they would work in rice fields and whatever they collected, they would sell. It was kind of their way of life, And for many immigrants, it's like that. They don't have jobs essentially, but they work the fields and whatever they produce, they sell. So I think it's just genetic, it's in my DNA. But obviously it takes something to bring it out. So what really brought it out was when I graduated from high school, I was an overachiever in high school. And nothing ever really did it for me. I was on the volleyball team and I was the president of our division and I was in the broadcasting club and it was exciting, but it wasn't I didn't find my thing, And I had gotten an internship at Ernst & Young. And so I thought that it was I was hot. Yeah. You know what I mean? 39th floor. Yeah. They give you the little scan card. You have access to.
Which, where was the building?
Right in Times Square, the one that's right in the middle of Times Square. And so they had this huge cafeteria. You have your little swipe card. You get the little salad bar thing and all that. It was so good. But I remember during that, it was a 6-week internship and I would look out the window and I would want to jump out of the window. So from that age, I was no, there's no way that I'm working for anyone. And it's so funny that you asked this question because I never really thought about it. It was just something that was embedded in me. But I think that experience is what was my catalyst at such an early age. Getting a job and knowing that it's not what I wanted to do. And the funny thing is that and I had gotten so many scholarships that I really didn't have to work through college, because I ended up going to City College, and so like I had leftover money, so I was able to just focus on school. And the funny thing is that how I got into taxes was because I got a W-2 from Ernst & Young. It was a paid internship. They paid me like $18 an hour. And like at 17, I was like a millionaire. Like I just felt so rich. And they even paid for my vacation. I went to, my family paid for a cruise for my graduation. And like they paid me during my vacation and everything. And like when I came back, there was a check. I was like, yeah, this is great. But I remember how I felt being in the building, that there's got to be a way for me to make money and like be happy.
I have to be here.
Exactly. And so I had to do my taxes, and my family's accountant said, okay, it's going to be $125 for you to do your taxes, and you're getting $125 back. And I was like, no, I can do this on my own, because like that's not a good ROI. That's not a good return on investment. Like I remember thinking that. And I went into finance when I was in City College. That's what I started. And I was like, that's not a good deal right there. And so I learned how to do taxes, and I really enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed it. And I took a course at I believe it was Jackson Hewitt. I took a course at Jackson Hewitt, and I said, okay, I like this, and I'm going to do it part-time while I'm in school, because it's a really good skill to have. And I was like, death and taxes, like that's where my mind was, right? So like everyone's going to have to do taxes. And I quit. I got a part-time job, and then like within 2 weeks of me getting the job, I became like the general manager of the place. I think it was partially because I had a child, and I was like good at managing things. And that felt really good. And coincidentally, right? I don't like the word coincidence. Everything is like synchronicity. I ended up meeting a franchise owner that was expanding into 7 stores, and he wanted me to help him expand. And he mentored me for like a good year. And I was like, I just want to own one of these. Like this was my way in, and they were a new franchise. And so the franchise fee was very low. And I just started asking like people like to support me, like, hey, not even support me, because I had taken some business classes, like if they wanted to be an investor, if they wanted to help me, and I would run the company. And one of my friends actually lent me $20,000 to start up the company. Yeah. So like that was that whole, how that happened. It was, yeah.
Yeah. You said also a few times that you were really determined, and I'm curious a little bit more about that contrasted with where your calling went and like the source of where that came from. Because I know that I grew up with a father who grew up in the Great Depression, and he was an immigrant family, and there was always this like drive to succeed and make it and be someone and all of that, and I hear some of that in your story too. And I'm curious about that type of determination. You mentioned that when your grandfather died, you hit a breaking point. So there was something in your feeling of your life that was like, maybe like I'm not living the life I meant to live, or some kind of like not fullness or realness or like resonance to that determination, even so. And then you discovered your calling. So what does that feel like, that difference between that kind of determination that was driving you to like run your own business, and then kind of like waking up a little bit to something else you were meant to do?
Yeah, so I have to be 100% honest. My waking up was like an empty feeling. My waking up was an empty feeling. And I know that's like counter to what most people say, like they're so alive and they're whatever. But after I sold the company, I was so grateful to have sold it for, it was low 6 figures, but it was a good amount of money. Like I'm a modest living person. In the beginning stages, I was like, yeah, BMW and all of that stuff. But, after a while, I let all of that stuff go, especially when someone that you love passes. You don't care about material things as much. And I just gave everything up, and I completely isolated myself. But I knew in that I just knew that it wasn't the end. I didn't have a deep depression where I was like, I'm going to end my life. Like I didn't get thrown into that. And then my daughter was 7 at the time. So she was like a driving force in my life. And I remember staying home. I was still married at the time. And staying home and then being thrusted into like the housewife, the mom role. And it's just started to trigger a bunch of stuff inside of me, because I watched my grandmother and her daughters all they were all housewives, and I was like, there's no way that I'm gonna let that happen to me. Like, no, we have access to education in this country. Like, even though I dropped out, I still valued what I got. I still valued what I got from my education. And so I went into that state of going inward. And so then the determination switched from accumulating material things to, well, what's my soul's purpose? I know I have a soul, right? Like, I know I have a soul. And it's so funny because being in New York, and so I started taking the train because I started working in Flatiron out of my healing center, and I hadn't taken the train in so long. And I saw an advertisement, and it was like, it's like bubble wrap for your soul. And it's like a moving company. And I was like, this is a thing. Like, like the soul is a thing. And so then the determination shifted from like trying to accumulate things outside of myself to have this internal happiness. Because at the same time, my marriage was failing. And like my marriage, it was on the rocks for a while. And we knew it was ending. And that was a really rough place for me to be in. But the determination for my daughter to not suffer during that transition is what led me to the path of seeking and finding a way to mutually separate from my husband and maintain my sense of independence and wholeness so that she could have somebody to model,
Mm-hmm. Did you have a follow-up? You sure?
Yeah, but you may have the same.
I'm changing the subject. Do you want to? Teresa has a follow-up.
No, I wanted to dig a little bit more into that process of waking up a bit, that like you had this kind of awakening sense around your grandfather's death and something was communicated to you. And then you've told us the story a little bit more the other day and you alluded to it now, but about what happened then, just about how you just kind of, you knew that you weren't going to go down that path anymore. You sold your business, you did all that. Just talk a little bit more about maybe like what that felt like, how you knew you had to make a change and then the changes you made. Cause then you kind of went into a period of 2 years, right? Where you were maybe seeking, or you can describe it.
Yeah. So after I sold the company, it was about a year and a half, about 2 years, so then I switched focus to really trying to understand emotional pain, right? Because I lost someone and it hurt so bad and I didn't understand why it was so painful, right? Like, why is it so painful? That was the question that was in my head. Not why did it happen, because I understood death, but why did it hurt so bad? And what made me question that is because when my grandfather passed away, my daughter didn't cry. And when I found out that he passed, the first thought in my head was, how am I going to tell my child? Because that's her grandfather and she was raised with him. And I told her and she was like, oh, okay. It was just so natural. It was just so natural. She was like 6 or 7. And it was just so natural for her. And it hurt so bad for me. And it made me see, I have this mind that I'm like, okay, I need to see this from a different perspective. And it was like, why did it hurt me so bad? And my daughter just had this knowing that it was part of the process. And then this knowing that where he went, like she knew where he went. And I was like, well, if she knows, I got to find out. Right. And so I just started to read, a lot of books and not, religious or spiritual texts, because that never resonated for me. I grew up in the Hindu tradition, which I loved. And they always spoke about, like there's one source for everything and there's no good, there's no evil. It's just karma, right? And so that always resonated with me. Like things are a cycle and, you do good, you get good, things like that. I discovered that karma is a little deeper than that. So I never went to other religions because it felt good. And I started to read books on like neuroscience because I wanted to understand it from a scientific point of view. And I remember I was reading one of this book that I just can't remember the title of it. One of my favorite books is The Seed of the Soul by Gary Zhukov. Amazing book because he starts telling you that you're a multidimensional being. And when I read those words, I was like, I don't know what this means. But I know it's true. I don't know if it's a kids channel. No, I don't know what this means, but I know that it's true. And so I just started following the feeling. So I moved out of my logical brain and I just followed the feeling. And one of the books spoke about the Theta Brainwave and did a Google search, literally did a Google search. What is the Theta Brainwave? And this Thetahealing Center pops up and it's in the Flatiron District. The building number is 1133. And I'm like, I got to go there. And that same night, they were having like this manifestation meditation. And of course, we all heard about law of attraction and The Secret. And something about that resonated with me. I'm like, yeah, this is a real thing, because I was always so determined. And like my friend lent me 20 grand to start my company. So I believed in like those synchronicities. And that's what led me to the center. And I had my first session and like my mind was blown. It was my first experience with energy work, and so much got lifted. And the healer, she said, you know, we teach you how to do this. I was like, yes. I heard that I was a healer. This might be it. This might be the thing. And I took my first class, and the class was so powerful that it wasn't even about the words that they were saying. It was about the experience that I had, that I felt like my body opened up to this flow of energy that I had never experienced before. And it flowed, like it literally felt like it was flowing through the top of my head, penetrating my brain. And I was reading all these things about like neuroplasticity and neuropeptides and it just, I started to feel it. And that was like the opposite turning point, where it was like, I felt this. I can't go back. I have to go deeper into this. There's no way that I'm going back to the way that I lived before, because this feeling is what's real. That's what it was.
So I want to explore a little more something you mentioned. That was a good follow-up, by the way. I was just pointing at Teresa, for those of you not watching the video, of which there is none. So I want to kind of explore clarity, because you described receiving a message from somewhere, probably unfamiliar to you at that time. And then you described looking something up online. And like when I look something up on the Google searches, if I'm invested in it, if I'm really interested in it, I can go through pages of the Google searches. Page 2, page 3, page 4. First record was this Theta Healing Center in New York. You went, it sounds like it was, if not that night, very shortly thereafter, and it was like a cascade of very quick events. The clarity seemed to be very obvious to you. It's not like you explored more, or that you went to 10 different seminars, or that you spent a year researching these things. Like everybody has their own version of of kind of getting to that point of clarity. Mine is different than yours. I think both of ours we're all kind of different, but yours is very interesting, because it seems to me that it's like you had a sense of knowing, seeing that information right away, that this was something calling to you. So I guess what my question is like, what is that experience like on the inside for you? What is that says yes, and that's it? We don't need to look any further. We don't need to, check another search engine or look at 10 different websites.
Yeah, I love that. I love that question, right? So this is where like that whole business time period comes in to play. So I had a mentor in the early stages of the business, and when I came in, he had 4 stores, and I think he was at $250,000 a year in his revenue. And he mentored me for 3 years, and in that 3-year time period, he jumped from $250,000 to like $2 million. And I was like, dude, what is your secret? What do you do? He's like, I follow my intuition. And I'm like, what does that mean? I don't know what that means. And he would tell me like, listen, if you look, whenever I'm about to buy a store, whenever I'm about to do whatever, you go with what you feel. And I was like, well, if he's making millions like that way, obviously there was a lot of hard work and tactic involved. But in order for him to make his choices on like what's the best area to pick. And it's so funny that I learned how to use my intuition from a man, because it's a woman, it's a female thing. But so I started practicing that, using my intuition in business. And it would just be practicing, dropping out of my head, dropping out of the thoughts, and dropping into my body, into my heart, into my stomach, into my feelings, and going with that. And I grew up with West Indian parents, and they were like real, like superstitious people. And my grandmother and great grandmother, like, I don't feel good about this, or like my eye is jumping, and like, so I always had that. And it's funny because you asked me a question about determination, and that determination always felt like it came from outside of myself. So I always felt like something was pushing me, that I knew it was me. Like, it wasn't God or it wasn't something else, but it was like a higher part of myself that was like, yeah, Rachel, go do that. And the negative thoughts would be there. But like, that voice was so much louder of like, you really can do this. Like, you really can open that company at 23. Look at the money that just landed. The fears, I would see the fear and I would feel the fear, and I would like make the choice anyway. So when I did that Google search and when I heard all of these things, I think I just had practiced through normal life, quote unquote, normal life, these abilities. Because it's like abilities that are innate in all of us. We just don't even see it. We don't see how powerful it is until we really like tap into that source. So when the Google search came up, I started to get the feeling in my stomach, and I was like, oh, this is it. This is it. And when I went to the center, there was this feeling of deja vu that was so powerful. And I just did not let my negative thoughts talk me out of what I was about to do. And it was a painful process to release what I released in that session. And I didn't let that deter me either. So, and I always felt like and I know for a fact, my journey has been so accelerated, because when I tell people like, yeah, I just got into this. And when we say into this, right, like into the spirituality, which we're spiritual beings. So I don't even want to get into that. But like, yeah, I just started like this. I just did my first retreat, maybe a few months ago. And like, oh, you already have a healing company? Like, what? How did that happen? It's because I always followed the intuition. Like, I always felt intuition. We all feel it. It's just we ignore it. Many people ignore it because they don't know where it's going to lead. But I've always had that like leap of faith thing. So I just dropped out of like that analytical mind that wants to go through a million searches and then like Google Analytics the data and stuff like that. And I just went with that. It popped up. It's synchronistic. I have to follow that. Like, it's completely clear. I have to go with that. There was so much in my mind because the meditation was like 30 minutes. I was living in Westchester at the time, and that was Flatiron. And of course the thoughts were like, there's going to be traffic. You got to take the bridge. You got to pay toll. Who's going to watch Francesco? You just put dinner on. But there was all of that in that moment. Yeah. And it was like, no, this is more important. This is more important. And I was like, husband, please watch child. Where's the easy pass? I got to go.
That's awesome. Well, if you're willing to share, I'm curious about what you released in that session. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about, maybe by talking about that, tell us a little bit about what Theta Healing is. And maybe if you're willing to talk a little bit about what needed to be released for you to move forward.
Yeah, definitely. So in that session, so even though it was only like a year or two ago, maybe 2 years ago, I've done so much work on myself since then. So I'm like, let's go back to the very beginning. Yeah, in that session was actually a lot of resentment that I had towards my mother for abandoning me. Like that was the big thing. And then also feeling like I had to carry my entire family and having that burden on my shoulders. And I remember the healer, she was like, she's like, you just have these strings on your shoulders and you're like, and she did this motion and I started to cry because she was just like pulling and pulling and pulling. And that's exactly how I felt. And I started to cry and I was like, well, how do you even see that? And she energetically like released those burdens and released those belief systems. So Theta Healing is a modality. It's an energy healing modality in which they're able to identify your root belief systems, that your limiting belief systems that are blocking you, that are keeping you in karmic patterns. And they're able to use the energy of source, the energy of all that is, to change that belief and then give you downloads to replace you with a more empowering feeling. And what drew me to it was the science behind it, how they were blending this innate part of me that I knew because I grew up in the Hindu tradition, and we knew about the chakra systems and we knew about energy work. And that was a very strong belief that I had, that we have these auras and these energy systems, because it was in our books, like it was in our texts and yoga, and everybody's like equinox, like blew up, made yoga blow up, right? So like it had to be a thing, like it had to be a real thing. So that's really what, like, so they took it from, not that they took it, but meaning like the knowledge came through and it became so mainstream because it's something that really works, right? Things don't get huge unless it works, right? So having that background, I had a very strong belief going into energy work. So I wasn't skeptical about it. And so it took that aspect of like the mystical and blended it with the science of like, okay, so we're just going to use this energy work now instead of just changing the feeling in your body, but we're actually going to change the flow of the neuropeptides in your brain, and we're going to make changes in your neuroplasticity. We're going to make these instant changes. And I felt that. I felt how instant it was in the session. And on top of that, then we used muscle testing so I could visually see that the beliefs were changing in my system, in my subconscious. And it was so powerful. And one thing that really stuck with me was like, she said to me, we all have this ability. She's like, you got to learn how to do this. Like, we all have this ability. You don't have to come to me. And that was what like drew me in, because I've always been a self-sufficient person. I would not ever, I don't even go to doctors to heal me. Like, you know what I mean? Like my grandfather was the guy, like, you have a splinter, like pull it out yourself, or like whatever, like don't go to the doctor. So when she said like you could heal yourself, I was like, yes, I know that there are wounds that are so deep that I didn't know how to heal them. I didn't know how to fix them. And she's telling me that I could fix myself. Like, that's what sold me on it. And it was so empowering. It was such an empowering process. And my daughter has even taken the classes, and like she's 12 now. I think she took it when she was 11. And to see her working with other people, and to know that she has this tool at such an early age to be able to dig into these belief systems, it is such an empowering thing, because it reminds me, the way the session flows, it reminds me of like a psychology session when you go in with a psychologist. Because when I was like 14, 15, I went to see a psychologist and it just didn't resonate with me. But it reminded me of that format, because they talk you through what your issues are and they get to that bottom belief. But what was so good about this is like there's a replacement for it. So it's not just like bringing your issues up and not solving it, because that's what I feel like psychology just talks through it and doesn't give you the essence of the change, right? Like you have to keep searching yourself. But this was so empowering, because it's like, yes, you felt this way for this reason. And every belief system that we have teaches us something. And so it highlights what you learned. And then that's the second part that was so empowering, because I remember in the session, you know, being abandoned by my mother taught me how to be independent and how to be strong-willed. And I was like, yes, okay. And then she was like, well, do you want to release that? Do you want to know how to be independent without feeling abandoned? And I was like, yes, that's exactly what I want to feel. And yeah, it was such an amazing process. And I was like, I have to do this work. It changed my life, because from the time of that first session, and I was in that place of not knowing what to do next, I became a teacher of the modality like within 7 months. And I held my first class, and then I opened my company. And so it was like such a rapid change. And so now I'm on a mission again, and I have like that determination and that will back. And now I'm like fully expressing my soul's purpose, like expressing my calling. And when the information came to me 2 years ago that I was a healer and that there was no blueprint and nothing was there, I still moved in that direction and everything laid itself out. And then now I do blueprint readings for people, which is like so ironic, and I remember telling myself like, I need a blueprint, right? Like I bought a franchise because there's a layout that comes with it. And I'm like, I need a layout. So I finally like tuned into my layout.
So I want to do something here. I want to kind of bookmark this point. So we can, because I do want to talk about your business, how you help people, in particular, the kind of differences between this kind of business and, what you're doing before taxes. But there's one thing I don't think we can leave out, which seems super crucial, is having a child at the age of 17. And I have a friend, we have friends back in Brooklyn. And when I became a dad, he pulled me aside. He said, Stephen, there are two types of people in the world, parents and non-parents. And I was like, oh my God, that makes perfect sense. Like really a person who is a parent has a different vibration, different feeling, a whole different thing going on than somebody who isn't. And I know our lives changed dramatically. But the age of 17, like that's a whole different reality. And I can't help but notice how accelerated your path is. And I wonder if there's a connection between the two, because like you first kind of stumbled across this whole world in 2 years, and now you're like fully expressed, like helping people. Like there's been no kind of lag time, it seems. So talk about being what that was like at the age of 17, having a child, and then how it shaped you going forward in terms of school, in terms of our business, and kind of decisions like that, in terms of being married and then not being married.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah, I really do. I say I owe it all to my daughter. I do. So when I had her, she gave me meaning, right? And I think that was like the whole determination behind the first business. Like, I just want my daughter to see me as like this entrepreneur, this woman in business, and I want her to look up to me. She taught me so much on how to deal with life and how to be nurturing and how to be compassionate. So when I went into business, I want to say like a lot of my success was due to like having that nature. Having that nature. And then she taught me how to balance. She taught me how to, when I say balance, meaning not work too hard and you know what I mean? And still make time for family. And so I think the biggest thing about being a mom is you just become this multifaceted, like multidimensional person. I love that word. That's my favorite word, because we don't have to be one way. We don't have to be one thing. And learning that so early on is what accelerated me, because I didn't have to have like the learning curve that I see most entrepreneurs go through, where like they work super hard in their business and then they get burnt out and then they're like, I just want to quit and give it all up. And then they really do quit and give it all up and then go get a job and not fulfill what they need to fulfill. But having her was like this beautiful blend of like having determination, but then always having my values in mind. So that's why when it stopped being fulfilling, I was like, I'm not going to continue this way, because this is affecting her. I'd come home miserable. I'd come home miserable, right? Because the work was no longer fulfilling. Even in essence, when you do taxes, you're helping people get money back, and that's a really good thing. You're helping people with their finances. But it wasn't my life's purpose. It was not my life's purpose. It was essential to do the work and be the accelerated person that I am today. It was an essential step, and there's no way that I would have jumped into this so quickly without having that background. Because there are a lot of people that I took the training courses with that have no idea how to do business. There are these beautiful, like compassionate, healing people. They don't know how to market, and they don't know how to sell, and they don't know how to get clients. And there's like this misconception that you cannot sell your healing services, right? And so I coined this thing. I'm sorry, I just have to say this. It's okay to sell your soul. It's a joke that I would make. It's a joke that I would make. Like, this is our life's work. This is our soul's work. It's okay to sell it, because selling is just you being proud of and getting paid for a product or something that you've created, right? That's what selling is. So like, be proud of your soul's work and get paid for it. And so all the skills that I gained in that first business, and then all the skills that I learned from being a mother. I mean, you know how many things that you have to juggle as a parent, and then you have to deal with this personality and you have to deal with your own belief systems, and you have to like see eye to eye, and you have to compromise, and you have to do things that you never thought you would do in a million years for another human being. It gives you this perspective that I feel when you go into a company and when you have employees, you're able to deal with them in a more balanced way. Because I've seen, entrepreneurs, like their biggest not failure, but their biggest challenge is not building a proper team. When you're opening a company, and I had about 25 employees, and that team is so important. The team is so important because it's how you build your business, is how you build your operation. And it's also like that entire team is a reflection of who you are. And so if I didn't have to like raise a child, I took on that nurturing role as an entrepreneur. And it's funny because my husband was always like my ex-husband was always the one for the discipline. Like he would be the discipline and I would be the nurturer. But I was like paying attention to all of the dynamics, knowing that there's a balance, like knowing that she's balanced because I'm the softie, like he like good cop, bad cop kind of thing. And I just like took that into the business world. And so when it wasn't working, I had so much faith in my skill that I knew I was going to open something else. It's funny because in my break period that I took for reflection, I really wanted to open a UFC gym. And that's actually coming in the future. I don't know if I told you guys about that. Yeah. No, I'm definitely going to do that. The timing was off. And in that time period, but I flew to California and I was like about to sign my documents and like, that's exactly what we spoke about. And I was about to sign the franchise agreement, and then I had an issue with the territory. Then I had an issue with the building that was under construction and we couldn't get certain permits. And I was like, well, this is all wrong. And I think that's what really pushed me. That's what like just slapped me in the face and said, you're going in the wrong direction again. You're going from one business to another business. Like, why do you think this is your path? And of course I didn't see it at the time, but I was still on the healing path. But the whole time that I was doing the classes, I was like, I'm doing this for personal development. I'm doing this to heal myself. I'm doing this to empower myself. I'm doing this to like know my purpose and know my reason for being here, because it's like we're human beings and no one knows why they're here. Like 99% of people on the planet, like, well, who put us here and what are we here for? Like we have wars over this. You know what I mean? And I really wanted to answer that question. Like, so that's what I was doing it for. But then it all tied together. Like as I got deeper into the work, then I was able to see things on a bigger picture, that the business knowledge that I had to take it to expand in the healing way so that I can affect people on a deeper level. And I just had to be willing to step up into it. I just had to. And this was in my head, right? Like if I don't do it, who will? You know what I mean? Not to say that there aren't amazing people that, that are not doing amazing things, but I know that I'm here for a specific reason, to help specific people and, on a deeper level that I can't even comprehend. And I'm going to live up to that. I don't want to let them down, and I don't want to let myself down. Does that answer your question? Because I feel like we went.
Yeah. Go back to the book part.
Well, I want to just emphasize one thing you said, which is about people asking for money for their services, because we're used to paying for like a thing. I want to go buy something, a TV or a scooter, whatever, and we're used to just exchanging value in that way. And but I know when I started as a coach years ago, I always thought like, oh man, this is like not a thing necessarily like that. It's not a material good. And I got a great piece of advice, and and this kind of brings me to one of our interests in talking to you, which is that you've turned something invisible into a big, viable, strong business. You're helping a lot of people. You're teaching, like it's a real thing, And I imagine there are people listening to this who need help understanding how that can be, because we're used to just exchanging value for things. And what I learned was that in this culture, in this society, it's so inherent that we do exchange money. We use money to exchange value, that if you don't charge somebody, they actually won't receive the value that you're giving them. If they don't give you some money, like if that exchange doesn't take place, they will be diminished. Their experience will be diminished. So by charging for these things that are not quote unquote visible, you're actually improving the experience for the customer, or for the client in this case, because that's how we exchange value. This is not, a kind of a Native American tribal community where we barter and we have relationships with people. There's like social aspects going on. There's like, that's completely different than what we're dealing with now. So exchanging value by using money is so important. And so I want people out there listening, maybe you've got a special skill, a special talent, a special hunger that could be expressed in the way that you have. Like, this is why it's so crucial for you to charge for it. Because if you don't, that part of our mind that we've been conditioned to basically believe in won't kick in, and you won't be helping people.
Yeah, I love this because I actually have a program specifically that helps spiritual entrepreneurs through this. So you pay singers for their voice, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, we all used to buy CDs back. I mean, now CDs, you hear me? Oh my God. MP3s and like, like iTunes and all of that. So it's just shifting the mindset of the collective to know that their personal development and their personal growth is worth paying for. Mm-hmm. So for me, like when I went into business, I paid a mentor $10,000 to learn how to market. So for me, personal growth and investing in my personal growth was like not a choice. Like, you do this, you pay for this, this is how you succeed. And that's how I accelerated. I didn't do it alone, and I didn't do it without putting money up. Like when I opened the first company, yeah, my friend lent me 20 grand. I came up with the second 20 grand. My overhead was 100 grand. Like, you got to put money into what you're doing. And so spending money on your personal development is key because you're going to take it so serious. Like, you know what? Instead of me buying that TV, or instead of me buying those clothes and those shoes that on the outside it's going to feel good. No, let me put money into what's going to feel good on the inside. So once you get someone to see that, then you'll have no problem, showing them like this is the value. But what I notice is deeper. When you lack confidence, and this is with most coaches and healers and spiritual workers, their gifts come so natural that they don't even know what it's worth. And they don't know how powerful the work is. Yeah. So they're afraid to charge for it. Mm. And it's the lack of faith and confidence they have in themselves and their own ability. And so what happens is, vibrationally, because we live in a vibrational universe, that person that you're trying to sell to is going to feel that shakiness, and then the transaction is not going to occur. So I teach people literally how to be so confident in your ability, because there are so many people that do amazing work, but they just have to have the confidence. They have to have that built up, because that confidence that they have in themselves as they're healing that person is going to translate to that person, in addition to all the work that they're doing. And then both are going to grow from the process. So we just need people to see it that way. And also, like, my biggest thing is changing this connotation, I think is the word, that healing has. We're not fixing anything that's broken. And so most people won't go into healing work because they won't admit that they're broken, or they won't go into coaching because they won't admit that they need help. But for me, healing is expansion. Like, healing is just expanding the wholeness that's already there. So that's like my mission, to like push that out there so people can see it. And things are shifting really quickly. Like, we have Tony Robbins, and we have all these motivational speakers that charge tons of, I think a Tony Robbins like Date with Destiny or something's like $8,000 or something, right? And you're not even like doing one-on-one with him, like you're in a room full of people, but you can just see it's like his level of confidence, and then obviously the level of attention that he puts into the work, right? But so people are moving in that direction. Like, the ones that know they need help, they're moving in that direction. But they haven't seen that explosion when it comes to the healing community. So it's happened in like the motivational speaking community, but not in the healing community. So there is this overall collective idea that, you know, healing is not as powerful as these other ways of work and as motivational speaking or as like informational classes or guides and things like that. But anyone who experiences the work can tell you how powerful it is because it's a deeper experience. And yeah, so because it's such a new thing, there's so much room for it to grow and there's so much room for expansion to happen within the industry, but we have to look at it as an industry. And I think because the gifts are so pure, right? Like we don't want to charge money because money has this negative connotation, right? Because there's so many bad things that are happening with money. And then on the other side of it, we have to see that money is just a tool, that it's not bad or good. And, you know, that's another thing that we have to shift. It's not bad or good. Money is just a tool. It's this neutral energy that you can use to either feed your family or start a war. It's up to you. So like we have to switch that, you know, we have to get people to see that. And so then they'll stop being so hesitant about spending money on themselves. And a lot of people don't even know their own worth. So they think things outside of themselves, it's solid. They can see it. So let me spend money on that thing that I can see because I know what it's worth to me. They can't see the worth they have in their own hearts and in their own bodies. So that's the hesitation that they have in spending money toward that. And I'm like on a mission to help shift that, especially in the healing world, because this is like the next thing. Like this is like yoga already like set the stage, and like the fitness industry is booming. Like these are all gateways to now this deeper work. And that's how I started. I started working out, and then it was like, wait, I lost 50 pounds, 60 pounds, and I was like, wait, if I could do that just on my willpower, like what else can my mind do? So we're just kind of moving into that phase, and like most spiritual workers or healers, coaches, we're kind of like on the leading edge of it. So it's scary. Like it hasn't been done for us. So we have to pave the way. So that's why a lot of us are hiding. Like, wait, who's going to do it big first so that I can follow? But no, like you're going to have to be the one to do it big because now we're coming into this new phase, you know?
Well, we've experienced what you do personally, and it is really powerful. And it's very clear that you have no lack of confidence about what you're doing, which is so evident, I'm sure, to listeners of this interview. And it's like, woo, I feel on fire just listening to you. So I definitely want you to talk a little bit more about what your soul's purpose is, you know, and now the kind of work that you do with others to fulfill that purpose. And maybe as an add-on to that, how you see this work as relevant and critical to the transformation happening on the planet right now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, huge. So my work recently shifted in the whole year that I've been doing it. And I'm so proud to say that I've only been doing this a year. Like so many people are like, yeah, I've been doing this 15, 20 years. No, I did it in a year and I'm sorry. And you know, the changes are huge and amazing. Like you don't have to go sit on a mountaintop for half your life, and you don't have to go to these silent retreats, and you don't have to do all these things that people were doing before to experience actual physical change in your life, in your mind, in your body, and then in your external environment. But my work has shifted because I plunged myself into a deeper understanding. So in addition to being a Theta Healing teacher, I created my own program. And I call it the 8 Steps to Transcendence because, oh my gosh. And within a year, I feel like I've entered this state of transcendence, like this state of bliss that I cannot describe, where I wake up every single day and I'm just deeply, deeply fulfilled. Like it doesn't matter if I'm going to go on an interview or if I'm going to teach a class of 25 people, or if I'm just going to, you know, pick my daughter up from school and we're going to probably have some ice cream or something, but like just deeply fulfilled in waking up every day. And I just want everyone to feel this. I really want everyone to feel this. And so my soul's work is for everyone to feel this, because I know that if I can feel this, like I am not different from anybody else. And if I can feel this, like everyone can. We all have access to this. Especially when I started teaching the Theta Healing technique, it was just so beautiful to see how someone would walk in, you know, and within 3 days they would walk out and they're like, oh, I know how to heal myself. And now I can heal people. I can't wait to heal my mom. I can't wait to do this technique on my sister or my, you know, whoever it is, or sometimes not family, because, you know, that gets a little, friends, you know, whatever it is. But yeah, so I teach that, and then I also created this program called 8 Steps to Transcendence, because I realized that there is this process, and I'll try to keep it as brief as possible because it's so deep. But there is this process. We do have energy centers in the body. And I've opened up to, I don't even want to say being a channel, because then that would imply that it's something that is outside of me that's receiving the information. And I know it's not something that's outside of me. I know it's just something that I have access to that's a part of me. But the best way to describe it in using language is a channel. So I've opened up to just receiving all of this beautiful information that showed me, like, this is the process that the human body has to go through. And we have these energy centers, and we have 7 of them. But what I saw for myself was that there's an 8th. And no one ever taught me that there was an 8th, and no one ever showed me that there was an 8th. So when I got this information, and I was like, yes, that is the thing that did it for me, was that 8th chakra, that energy that I would just always feel, and they can't see me, but I keep putting my hands over my head, because even from a young age, the voice was always up there, like, yes, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. And that's the 8th chakra. That's the higher self. And it's my mission to have everyone tune into their higher self, because it is the higher part of you. Like, on earth here, we're all looking for, like, our soulmates, and we're looking for God, and we're looking for this thing that's already a part of us. It's just a higher part of us, right? That more positive part of us that's always going to keep pushing us through. It's not anything that's mystical. But it's this beautiful self that we have that we can integrate into our physical body. And that's why I say we're multidimensional beings, because no, you can't see it, you can't touch it, but you can feel it. You can feel it, right? Like, just like you see fire, right? You could see it. You're not going to touch it because you know it's hot, right? You know when you feel it, it's going to be hot. You don't have to see the heat. So it's like you don't have to see this essence of you, but you can integrate it and you can bring it into your body. But I found that there is a process that if you haven't cleared the energy centers that are in your body, this part of you is going to have a hard time communicating and coming through to you. So that's definitely my mission, is to get people to open up the energy centers that are within the body, and then now tap into that 8th. And I started Googling 8th. Like, when I got the information coming through, I'm like, this has to be a thing. Like, this has to be a thing. Somebody has to be doing this. And there was some information out there, but it wasn't like a huge body of work. And the fact that there was some information out there, because we all get information, right? And like, this inspiration that comes through us is not only for us. That's the beautiful thing. And that takes so much pressure off for me, because I'm like, oh, well, you know, maybe if I don't do it, it's still going to get out there. So there's not this feeling of failure. And it's so funny because I think it was like Michael Jackson or Prince. Like, I remember him saying to someone, like, reading a quote that, like, he was with someone. He's like, you got to get me a pen and a paper. Like, these lyrics are coming through. And they're like, why are you in a rush? Because Prince might get it if I don't put it out there first. So I don't know what the exact quote was, but once I saw that, like, it was just like, have you heard that? Have you guys heard? Oh my God. So, because they know, like, these creatives know, like, that inspiration is in the air. It's in the air, and like, you could just grab it and tap into it, and like, oh, this one feels really good for me to put out there. Let me put that out there. And that's a note that I want to tell people. If it doesn't feel good, don't do it. Like, if it doesn't feel good, don't do it. Like, so many of us are striving what we think our purpose is, you know, but if you're striving and if it's not flowing, that's not what it is. Like, reevaluate. Check in, because there may just be a belief system that's in the way, that's pushing you in that direction. It's not true desire, because true desire and true inspiration is just going to flow. And that's how it was accelerated for me. Like, it flowed and it felt so good. And I just I would meet people that would say, hey, I want you on my podcast. Like things would just flow. And then like, oh, there's this room and do you want to teach your class here? Like, yes, 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 yes. And all I had to do was keep saying yes. But because I've tapped into that energy center and I allowed that to flow through my body and I just allowed myself to release a lot of the pain. And that's what I help people through is there's a lot of shame and guilt and a lot of heavy things that come with just being in this society, and not just being in this society, but like being raised by certain parents that have different belief systems, because we're entering a time that's so different than what it was just 100 years ago, right? We didn't even have light bulbs. Now we have Bluetooth, right? And electric cars. So things are so different. So generations and our genetics are like fighting with each other. And so we're feeling that like as we're coming in to these higher states of awareness, like our genes internally in our bodies are feeling like these sensations of pain and suffering because we have to adapt to the new information and we don't have a framework to adapt to the new information. So that's why I feel like my work is so important, because I do like to have things logical. So I feel like there's a framework that I provide to make sense to all the information so that you can logically use your intuition. And I know that's like a oxymoron, right? To logically use your intuition, but that's right. But that's what I do for people. It's like, this is why your intuition makes sense. This is why your intuition is the truth, because your body naturally knows what's best for it. Just like a woman doesn't have to put the cells together to make the baby, right? It just happens. That can happen with everything in your life if you just tune in to that system. But yeah.
Wow, that's a great place to stop. I gotta say, that's beautiful. I think one of the themes that we're really, you're directly addressing it, but we've it's been falling into more and more of our episodes, has been the notion of acceleration. And like 10, 20 years ago, when you realized you had blocks, you went to a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist, and it's years. And speaking from experience, like I spent years with very well-meaning people who had a lot of wonderful things to offer and share, and it helped me. But like in this day and age, in this kind of fourth density atmosphere, in the era of the quantum field, if you will, it's really not that complex, nor does it need to take that much time. So if you're somebody sitting there thinking like, oh, I could never do this, I've got all this baggage or all this emotional weight, or I'm depressed or whatever it may be, step into a place. I invite you to step into a place of like really seeing this as maybe not such a huge project. Maybe it's not going to take years to deal with this. Maybe someone like Hemma could help you with this in a matter of hours, days, weeks, but it won't be decades. And your story is emblematic of that, because you're moving.
Yeah.
So we have a coda of 3 questions that we ask all of our guests, and Teresa will kick us off.
First question is, what book or books up to 3 do you think every person should read?
Okay, yeah. So the first one that I mentioned earlier, which was Gary Zhukov, Seed of the Soul. And the second one, oh my gosh, I have to pick another one. Power versus Force. What's the author of that? Oh my goodness.
We'll find it.
Hawkins. And the third one is Dancing the Dream, I think by Jamie Sands. Those are the 3 that like started my thing.
Add it to the Christmas list.
I was going to say, we should have told you that question in advance. You could have 3 clear answers. So our second question, we're pioneering a new question tonight. We've been working with a set of questions, but we really like this one better than what we've been asking others. So you'll be the first one to ever answer this question. What understanding have you gained since your transformation that you would want your earlier self to know?
Yeah, this is so beautiful. Like you said, it doesn't have to take years. Like it can happen in an instant. Like if I just knew that back then, because there was baggage that I was holding on for a long time. I had a lot of trauma in my childhood too. And I carried it with me, up until my early 20s. And then I finally released it. So if I knew back then, it would be like, yeah, in a snap, it can change, it can shift.
Beautiful. Third question is, what are you most excited about now?
Everything. No. The future. The future. I have so much faith in the future. I have so much faith in this acceleration process and where we're headed. In the last 10, 20 years, like the growth that has happened on this planet, and then, just to imagine in the next 10 years where we're headed, I'm really excited about that.
Well, it's a beautiful place to end. Before we do officially sign off, we should give you a chance to just talk about where people can find you online, maybe any speaking appearances coming up or classes, things you'd like others to know about what's coming up for you.
Yeah, so I'm actually launching a webinar to explain the 8th chakra and that whole process. So they can register on my website. It's www.radiateyourgreatness.com. And you'll click on learn more, and then you can register for the webinar and take it from there. Yeah.
Do you do coaching, or you have clients?
Yeah, I do. So I do have some packages out there I specifically like to work with the spiritually conscious entrepreneur, but you don't have to be an entrepreneur. You just have to, if you have this calling and you want more clarity on what your soul's work is and what your soul's blueprint is, I do have on my website, I have a couple of different coaching packages.
Awesome. Well, we'll link to everything mentioned, to your website, to your packages, to the webinar in our show notes. We'll link to the books and a few other things too, I think, as I come to mind. Anything on social media, Facebook?
Yeah. Yeah, the Facebook and the Instagram. So my Facebook is Radiate Your Greatness. So facebook.com/radiate your greatness. And the Instagram is radiate_your_greatness. And then also my YouTube channel is Hemma Haridin.
All right, there we go. We even got in a few underscores. It makes me feel good. I've always been second to the party with my name and stuff. There's always been a little underscore here or there. Even Ownstream on Instagram, the Ownstream Instagram, there's one follower. They don't follow it. It's completely inactive. So we're own_stream. All right. Well, thank you very much, Hemma. Thanks everybody for listening. And this has been wonderful.
All right, that's it for this week's Ownstream podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this awesome interview with Hemma Haridin. Be sure to check out the show notes for this episode for links to everything mentioned, including Hemma's website, coaching offers, the webinar she mentioned, plus her social media profiles and YouTube channel, and of course, links to the book she mentioned. All of that can be found at ownstream.co/Hemma. That's ownstream.co/HEMMA.
Also, please sign up for our weekly tip-off email at ownstream.co and just click the sign up button in the upper right-hand corner. This is where we share each Monday 3 cool things we've learned in the last week in the areas of lifestyle, business, and spirit. This could be an amazing quote, individual tip, or tool designed to bring you more freedom and power in your life. So definitely sign up for that again at ownstream.co and just click sign up.
Finally, please leave us a review on iTunes. We really need your help in expanding our reach, helping us to inspire more people and spread the amazing ideas discussed in this episode with Hemma Haridin and others too. If it feels right to you, simply go to iTunes, search for Ownstream Podcast, click ratings and reviews, and then click that 5th star and leave us a brief comment on how this episode has inspired you. Thank you so much for considering that. We are very grateful. Also, we're on Twitter at Ownstream and on Instagram, where we post regularly at own_stream. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening to the Ownstream podcast. To learn more and connect with us, please visit ownstream.co or follow us on Twitter at Ownstream and Instagram at own_stream.